Hi faculty, and in this video I explain the new rubric that I will use to evaluate the teaching. And this rubric has the logic of multiple criteria decision analysis, and I explained the history and logic and application of that in the previous videos. So let me take you through this rubric. And this table is an ugly table, but I love tables because in tables I can lay things out and understand how they relate to each other and understand how it works. Now, following the multi-criteria or multiple criteria decision analysis, you will see how these parts of the table work. In this first column, we have the evaluative categories, and these come from our course evaluations as well as our functions and criteria. I have 4: organization, content, student development and performance, and instructor performance. And under these categories, I have criteria, and these criteria are in order of importance. And these criteria are mine. I'm trying to pull from functions and criteria, but I'm also trying to articulate more clearly what I think course organization means. And the first criteria is the course is aligned, and this comes from the Quality Matters rubric. And Quality Matters is an online rubric, but they're excellent at explaining how you align the objectives, assessment, materials, activities, and interactions all to meet learning outcomes. So that's the first criterion for organization. The second criterion is structure and flow, and the third is organization is explicit but flexible. That's our first category. Our second category is content, and my criteria are level and amount of material is appropriately challenging, students deeply engage, and the content meets the program and curricular objectives. Next, we have student development and performance, and these are pulled. The quantitative data is pulled from 3 of those categories in the students in the course evaluations for students. But I want to see that the students are appropriately challenged, and they meet those challenges. That the students are self-aware of their growth, and then students feel well prepared for the next level. Finally, we have the category of instructors, and this is pulled originally from, of course, our course evaluations. I'm first going to look at faculty attitude, fairness, and availability, and that these meet the student needs while enabling their student growth. As you know, I'm worried about the entertainer factor. So I want faculty to have good attitudes, have fairness, and be available, but all of this to enable student growth. The next criterion is that the faculty understand and they can assess and improve their abilities to meet the needs and provide appropriate scaffolding for learning and development. Scaffolding is a buzzword in education, that it really provide enough frame, enough for the students to grasp, but not too much and too little. Anyway, these are the categories and the criterion order of importance. I put these down as starting points, these in this order, and this is where I hope I get lots of faculty input. Do you like this order? Do you like these criteria for these 4? Are these 4 what you would evaluate? Because content is actually just 1 score, but I think it's so important for us to look at how the content, especially when we want to challenge. Anyway, so this is the category, these are the criteria, and these are rank ordered. The next category is I will look at the quantitative data. I will look at the scores, the averages on your course evaluations. And so we've got organization objective scores here. We have content scores here. And this is a student section. I'll look at 3 scores. I won't look at attendance and expected grade. And then those 4, I think 4 or 5 instructor scores. Okay. I will look at these scores in light of this, in light of these criteria. All of these scores aren't very good at telling me much about these criteria. That's why we need the qualitative data. The qualitative data comes from the verbal or the comments from the students in their course evaluations, but it also comes from your syllabus, your reflections, and if you have peer reviews, or I really want to see your syllabus. All of that verbal data is better at looking at these three, but I will look at the verbal data in light of the quantitative data. And so the qualitative data pulls from those sources, and I'm looking at the qualitative data in light of these ranked order criteria as we go down the list. Okay. So these are the two sources of data. And so this is what we call the additive part of the multiple criteria decision analysis. We have the organization, we have the categories, we add all this data up, and I have rank ordered this data. That's the first thing that I do. And I first had this rank order in a column right here, but it was redundant, and I talked to Kelly. Kelly Sharp-Hoskins helped me a great deal, and we decided to pull these rank order criteria. But I'm going to look at this data. First of all, I'm going to look at how it fits these rank order criteria. And then we're going to go to the formulas, how to convert the quantitative qualitative data into the scores or the ranks of meets expectations, exceeds expectations, or fails to meet expectations. And you will see what I have done is that on the course evaluation or the quantitative data, I've selected thresholds of 90% on 3 of the 4. So 90%, if you average 90% on the course evaluations, you meet expectations. On 90% on content, I put 80% on student development, but 90% on course evaluations. I created these thresholds based on long-term averages of the different types of courses, and you will see that these sound a little bit high, but once we go to the optimization below, you will see how you can push your performance beyond meets expectations. So if you score 90%, average 90% on course organization, you'll meet expectations. If you score 70%, you will fail to meet expectations. And if you score 100%, you're hitting, of course, the exceeds expectation. But this is only the first part. If you score 90% on the student evaluations, but then if your qualitative data notably shows that your course is more organized than what the students perceived, I will add to that. So you might have 90% on course evaluations, but it might be very clear from your qualitative data that the course is very well organized, and so that 25 would be bumped to 30, which would mean you would exceed expectations. And so this formula has an optimization built in, the qualitative optimization. And I really want, this is the weakness of our course evaluations, because those course evaluations capture just a little touch of what we're doing. And so, and I said I can add 5. I probably should put that as a variable, like 1 to 10 or something like that. So the qualitative data checks that. The same thing happens then if we go to content. I have the rank order criteria here. We have the content score. We have the verbal data on content. And to meet expectation on content, you need to have 90%. But the qualitative data can trump that or add to that or take away from that. And so you might have 90%, but if your qualitative trumps that or shows more clearly that it's better, then you can go from a meets to an exceeds expectation. So I'm guessing you're getting the process here. The student abilities are appropriately challenged, and that's not really measurable in the course evaluations, but it is measurable on the other sources of qualitative data. I've set a threshold of 80% because those scores are historically much lower, and the qualitative data can trump that. Okay. Faculty performance and development is the same process. It's at 90%. Now again, this is my first draft, but I'm hoping you like this logic. So I go across and I'll give you a score for each of the 4 categories, and this is, you can see the weight Meets expectation. If you meet expectation in all four, you're going to come up to 100. In the final, meets expectation is 80 to 119. Fails to meet is 79 or below, and exceeds expectation is 120 or above. But this only gives you a preliminary score. The next thing we do is we optimize, and this is really the power of this model, is that it not only gives you a somewhat objective content but it also adds a verbal to increase or to decrease to check that content, but then it optimizes the course as a whole. If it's a gen ed course and you scored 100, we will add 10 points to that 100 score, so it'd be 110. So if it's a gen ed course and it's the first time you taught it, that would actually add 20. You could actually move from meets expectations to exceeds expectation by these optimization scores. These optimization scores I've looked at really carefully, Kelly, and I looked at them carefully. I'm not happy with what's here. I'm uneasy about the numbers, the weights of the numbers. I know I'm missing things, and this is where we need faculty involvement. Another thing that I had to put here, graduate advising also adds points to your overall teaching score, but I'm going to evaluate each course here using this, and then I will average your courses, and then if you do graduate advising, I'm going to add points to the graduate advising, and then this is what I'm going to use to determine your rank of meets expectations or exceeds expectations or fails to meet expectations. Now that I've showed you the logic and processes of this, I thought I would apply this. So I'm going to go to the student or the sample, the teaching writing sample that I've shared with you before, and this was an actual sample, and I have permission from the faculty member to share that. And I like this sample. So when I evaluate this course, and this is pulled from the APR, this is English 571. And this faculty member talks about, in this first paragraph, the objectives, talks about how it went, and then reflects and analyzes what's going on. And I read all of this carefully. And then, and this is a requirement, the faculty member then gives us the numbers and then the comments. So the question would be then, how am I going to evaluate it? Well, this table does not have the student comments or the student data, quantitative data here, and that's something that I will require. But if you look, the organization is 90% or is 100%, so that exceeds expectations there. The content is probably around 80-78%, and the objectives in the syllabus are at 90% plus. So these four here are probably high 80s, and the instructors is about the same thing. You can see that this is about, I haven't looked at it, and it would be nice to have percentages here. This instructors is about the high 80s. So how do I evaluate that? Well, let's go back to the rubric. So you'll see that the organization was 100%, so this faculty member scored 30, but she might score even more if I go back and look at how well her materials, the readings, the course assignments support the purposes of 571. And if I'm convinced that this is a pedagogical course to teach graduate students how to teach English 111, then it aligns perfectly. The content scores a 25 or maybe a little bit lower, maybe a 22 or 23. Even though she does reflect on that, the content's a little bit low. We don't have data on student performance, but we do have data on instructor performance. So she's got a 22 here, probably a 25 there, and then 25 to 30 here. So this instructor's probably at about 100, which is right in the middle of meets expectations. But then we can optimize it. This is actually a service course, so we'll add 10%, and that means it's 10% harder because of the student population. And then we optimize it in these other ways. So if she scores quite high here and it's optimized, we might be able to push this course into exceeds expectations.